Hey everyone. This is Hober Mallow here, part of the Star Sonata 2 content dev team. Um, just here to kind of kick something new off. Figured I'd try something new. A lot of times I'm asked by players to explain why we did something, and they want us to, make blog posts and stuff. But oftentimes blog posts are not the appropriate place to put long form explanations for things, where we really get into the nitty gritty and we talk about why we did something or why we didn't do something else. So I figured I'd give it a shot. I'd give this a shot. I'd record myself explaining the decisions that we made, talking about what we are looking forward to, talk about why we didn't do something that you may have thought we should have done. Sometimes, maybe not all the time, but sometimes, um, and kind of peel back the onion layers a little bit and show you what's happening in the kitchen. So we're gonna start this little thing with the Neuroforge, and if it's good and people like it, maybe I'll keep doing it. That remains to be seen. All right, let's hop on into it. So, what are we here to talk about? We're here to talk about the Neuroforge mods. You all know what these are. You know what you we know what you like. We know you like mods. We know you like mods on top of mods. Ranger, which is the replacement for Sniper. Gunner, critical hit resistances, Seer, Speed Demon, Berserker, Engineer, Heat weapons, on hit weapons, beam weapon sizes, advanced class subskills, and regenerative shields. So all of this stuff is going to get talked about. I'm going to do my best to really explain not just what's happening, but like why we did it. So let's give it a go. Let's see what happens. Okay, so the Neuroforge. Um, we like mods. We think mods are good. We think mods are fun. We think players like mods, and we think players want more control over the mods that they get. So the Neuroforge is the culmination of like more than 10 years of just like dev time. We've come up with so many different ideas about what the mod system could look like. It's been insane, right? So this really is the culmination of just a lot of work, and we kind of threw things into the trash can maybe twice or so over the past 10 years because we realized maybe we were overcomplicating things a little bit too much. We were trying to deliver too much. So it took us a long time to get to this point because we frankly overcomplicated it. And so after realizing that we overcomplicated them and kind of going back to the drawing board, we realized that the simplest thing could probably be the best. So the Neuroforge that we have right now is a very simple addition on top of what we already have. Um, it is probably the best iteration out of all of the ones we came up with, and we came up with some crazy, wacky stuff. I would say it's the best because it takes what players already know and it just adds on top of it. It just gives you more of the same, and the same is good already. So why not give you more of the same? Um, and so there's a couple of things that change in this though, because we think that there are some aspects of the way the current mod system and neurobinding works, which isn't really necessary anymore. So let's go into that. So first of all, we realized and figured that we don't want the status of an item being neurobound to affect whether or not you get mods on it. Like if you have an amplified, an amped Jupiter Olympius energy, you should just be able to put mods on it, right? Like we're not going to stop you from putting mods on those items. We want you to put mods on those items, and so now if an item is acquired and it is neurobound, doesn't matter, you get to put mods on it. Great, amazing, bravo. Now if we stopped here, probably that alone would probably make a lot of people way happier. But we didn't stop here. So you can now mod your cool Neurobound gear, yes, but you can also strip your Neurobound item of mods and roll it again with Bendamite. So yes, if you get reinforced and I don't know, forceful or whatever on an item, you don't need to keep that. You can change those mods out by just using your handy dandy Bendamite and rolling again for some mods. You strip the mods off of it and then you roll it again with the Bendamite. And so that creates a situation where you can kind of fish for the mods that you want before you start really diving into the Neuroforge. Okay, why did we do that? We did that because we know that players are going to want to kind of decide and determine for themselves what mods they get. They're going to want to have some control over that system, because if they don't have any control, then it's just like throwing things into the wind. You're throwing dice into the wind. You're just rolling them on the ground, and maybe you get something you like. And we're okay with that, actually. I like the random aspect of mods. I like that you don't always get what you want, and you kind of have to make do with what you've got. Um, but we also know that you'd like to have a little bit of determinism. You want a little bit of control. So that is why we allow you to strip them and re-roll them. We know you're going to want to be able to use your pre-existing modded items. We know you're going to want to maybe use them to get better rolls on them. We know that there are items that are higher quality levels that maybe you're not going to want to Neuroforge immediately until you get a good mod base on them. And so that's why we're letting you do this. There's a thing to remember though. We will now get that. Actually, I'll just get to that later on. It's near the bottom. Okay, so there's some changes to modifications that we've made. So we've added some new ones to capacitors, cloaks, engines, etc. An example of that would be vectored. So vectored basically gives you this cool little plus turning bonus, but you have a minus thrust malice associated with the mod. And we think adding little mods like this to different item types gives you more things to either chase for or decisions to make that are unique to the particular item that you're modding. We've also changed some mods stats. So, for example, radioactive, it had for a while like flat electricity and increased percentage visibility. Well, now it has increased percentage electricity, right? It used to have that a long time ago. Anyone who's played long enough will know. We removed that back when you could weapon stack. So if you don't know, there was a time when you could get like 20, 30, 40, 50 weapons on a Berserker. You could have people like in battle spheres or whatever with like dozens of weapons. And all of the radioactive mods or evil mods or super intelligent mods even would stack and all kind of compound on top of each other. And so you could get really powerful bonuses by just stacking weapon hold aug mod bonuses, and then throwing on a bunch of radioactive and evil and super intelligent modded gear. Right? You just put a bunch of point defense zetas or Titan shredders, whatever they're called, titanium shredders. I don't remember what the heck those things are called, but you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who are around. And it was just really stupid, right? Like, let's just be real. It was stupid, right? You shouldn't be able to equip a bunch of weapons that you're never going to use to get bonuses that affect your main weapon. That's just dumb, right? It makes it so that your power is not gained in a very straightforward and clear way. You're gaining power through this stat called weapon hold, right? That doesn't actually do anything for you 99% of the time, but because there are weapons that are small, that are high tech level, and that you can get mods like evil and super intelligent and radioactive on, now you get to be stronger, right? It doesn't follow the power curve of any other system in the game, and so we had to knock that out. And so because of that, radioactive got slaughtered. We massacred it. I'm sorry, but it's okay. It has we used the revive spell on it, and now radioactive is back, and you get percentage like regen. Hooray! Okay, so miniaturized is replaced with compact. Miniaturized is a mod that is a little bit problematic. Miniaturized lets you make items really small, and it can take some big items and just slash them in size, like almost half. Actually, it is half actually on live. And this is not something that we want you to just kind of do thoughtlessly, right? Getting a mini mod completely changes the way that you kind of play the whole space puzzle game, right? Hull is not exactly a game of Tetris, but conceptually, right? Like with what you're doing, trying to figure out how to make all the pieces fit together, and well, I need this shield, I need this engine, so what energy can I use, right? It's a little puzzle, it's a little mini game. And miniaturized is a fun complication on that mini game, but or of that mini game, but it is a little too good. So we've done something which I think is a nice compromise. So first of all, we got rid of miniaturized on higher tech items. Now you get compact on those higher tech items. Compact as base at a baseline value is not stronger or even as strong as miniaturized. It's just not as good. But you can enhance compact. And if you enhance compact and you make it your enhanced mod, you choose to forego the enhanced power bonus that you can get from any other mod, you can make it stronger than miniaturized. Now, we know some people are not going to like the idea of having to shift to compact. So if you don't change the mods on your item, if you don't strip them, if you don't enhance, if you don't do anything else, you get to keep mini. So any of you with modded items that had miniaturized on them, they're not going to be taken off until you mod strip or Neuroforge. The moment you mod strip or Neuroforge, say goodbye to miniaturized. You don't get it back. That's just how it is. So over time, as we add more tech levels and more content, I'm sure miniaturized on mods is just going to go the way of the dodo and be extinct. Um, okay, so getting to this thing that I mentioned earlier. So when it comes to Bendamite, when it comes to adding mods and taking them off and so on and so forth, we knew that if we just let you use Bendamite to like roll infinitely, you would pull the roulette lever over and over and over and over again until you got just the right mod combination. Um, and we really want you to use the Neuroforge. Like, we really want you to use the Neuroforge. So instead of just allowing you to add as many mods as the item can fit with Bendamite, or 4, I think is what's allowed on live right now, we've limited it to 2. And we limited it to 2 because trying to find a specific combination of mods out of the dozen or more mods that can exist, it's very, very, very difficult. It's like I didn't do the math on this. I think Hank did the math. It's like sub 1% to get 4 of the exact mods you want. So it's really difficult, and you'll be spinning the wheel forever with Bendamite. And so instead of letting you sit and spin that wheel forever with Bendamite, we just said, look, we're going to limit you to 2 mods. It's going to take you a while to get the exact 2 mods you want anyway. But if you really want some more mods, you need to use the Neuroforge. This does not mean that you can only have 2 mods on an item once you start Neuroforging it. So, for example, you can get an item that drops, or, newsflash. I don't know if you know this, but we're going to explore making it so that when items are built, they can sometimes come with mods. So once we get that in, that'll be a really nice treat where you build your items and maybe you get a couple mods on them. So, granted, like let's say you get an item and it drops and it's got 3 mods on it. If you use a Bendamite on it, it's gonna get 2 added, guaranteed. Just we'll have 2 mods added, and so now it'll have 5. And once you Neuroforge, it will start with those 5 and then begin the process of either adding, subtracting, or mods, or improving a particular mod. So yeah, Bendamite is only going to allow you to add plus 2 mods. You can get more via Neuroforging. So let's talk about the Neuroforge. So what does Neuroforging do? The first thing that we realized as we were trying to come up with a simplified way of doing I'm so sorry, of doing modifications, was that we should probably just take the mods that are already good and let people make them even better. Wouldn't that be great? Newsflash, it is great. Actually, it's really fun. So mods on items can just be leveled up via enhancement. An enhancement is just this level that goes from 0 to whatever the maximum is for that particular item type, item levels, item quality. Jeez, item quality. And so the item quality at the highest quality level of item is like 125. So you can get your mod up to 125 enhancement level. And each point or each level of enhancement is 1% stronger mod. So if you have a 125 enhancement level mod, that mod is 125% stronger. Neuroforging also lets you add extra mods. You can add some cool, funky little mods like, amplified or resonating or rewired or extended on a shield. Oh boy, that sounds fun, doesn't it? I bet it does. So doing that will let you kind of craft the item you want. If you get a mod that you don't want, right? And we all know this happens sometimes. We get a mod and we're like, ugh, I wish I did not have this mod. You can take it off. You're not going to literally be able to click the mod and take it off, right? That would be too easy. We wouldn't do that. But you will be given an option to subtract the mod from the item when you Neuroforge. Every time you Neuroforge, you are going to be given one of these options. You also can swap one enhanced mod for another. So if you're leveling up an enhancement, you're like, oh, this is pretty cool, but then it offers you another enhancement that you might want instead, you can go ahead and change it. So all of these different options, other than leveling up the enhancement, cost some enhancement level, and we want you to kind of play the game of trying to figure out whether or not it's worth losing some enhancement to get an extra mod. I think most people are probably going to want to just get more mods. And not really give up enhancement level. But later on, once you get to higher and higher enhancement levels and you're looking for specific mods, you might actually just decide that it's better to give up a bunch of enhancement level to get a mod, or maybe it's better to give up a mod for enhancement level. Remains to be seen. So what does this cost? Well, you gotta have an extra copy of the item. Previously, Bendomite was added so that people could mod items and lock them. They would just neurobind the item and it would take it off the market, right? And so that was a really big thing. If you had an item or a bunch of items and you used the Bendomite on it, you could never sell it or give it to anyone. And that was part of what Bendomite did. And because you did that thing, it was just like, hey, okay, well, we're going to give you a little bit of extra power, maybe. Maybe it'll be something good. Maybe it'll be a mod that doesn't really do anything. But you're going to get something for it. So we're still keeping that. We still want mods and neurobinding and neuroforging to take items out of the market, right? And to make it so that players can't pass them on to anyone else or use them to sell or whatever. But we're just going to keep things a little bit open-ended by saying, well, the limiting factor for getting some mods on an item isn't the number of items you have, it's the number of Bendomite that you have. And the limiting factor for getting good mods is not going to be Bendomite, it's going to be copies of items. So you are going to grind items down basically and feed them into your Neuroforge in order to get more mods and get better mods. But Bendomite is still necessary in order to start the Neuroforge process. And it's necessary if you want to kind of reset an item's mods to try your luck again before you Neuroforge it. One thing to mention, I said earlier that you can level up a mod to higher levels of enhancement, like 125. Well, that's the level for legendary gear. And as you go up in quality level, you get more per Neuroforge. So you'll get more enhancement level on an enhanceable mod. You'll get more opportunities to get a bonus mod, and things like that, right? So your enhancement of higher quality items is just going to be better, right? These are things that are just things we decided we had to do in order to make it so that players wanted to do enhancement, wanted to use a Neuroforge, really cared about mods on higher level items. We know that right now, lower quality level items are perceived, well, let me just not even say perceived, are better than higher quality level items when they have good mods on them. And so we want people using their good gear, and if we want people using their good gear, then we need to make it so that they can actually get mods on them. So we've got the Neuroforge for that, and we've got kind of like, some extra cushion for those using higher quality level gear so that they get extra mods. Just a second, I need to get a sip of water. Okay, so we've gone over what it costs. We've gone over what quality levels do. For the Neuroforge, well, how high does it scale? As I said, higher quality level, the more mods you can have. I think the highest quality level is like 7 mods or something. And the highest enhancement level at the highest quality level is like 125. So what does this mean? This means you can take the amplified mod on an energy or shield, for example, from 20% to like 40% or more. So it's a pretty powerful increase, right? This is not baby levels of power, right? You are going to be stronger if you use the Neuroforge. That is a fact. Now, are you going to be the same level of stronger across all classes? No. Every class kind of deals with mods and benefits from mods differently, but it is a fact that you will be stronger for using the Neuroforge. So what are our goals here? Why are we doing this? Well, one, we want people to have more control over their mods. This is something people have been asking for a really long time. And we agree, we should let you have more control over your mods. Just not much more to say there. I agree. Um, Another thing is we want mid-game players to get good mods and to get stronger via a system that's predictable. Right now, gearing up and improving your power via mods is opaque. It's not very clear. Um, you kind of have to get all these copies of items and then use a bendamite, and if one item doesn't have good mods, you say, oh well, and then you kind of throw it into a storage, or you sell it, and then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, and it's kind of weird, right? It's not straightforward. It's a little clunky. So we know that there are some people who, would actually increase their power if it was straightforward and clear about how to do so, and if they could see how powerful they were getting. And so the enhancement levels are meant to do that, right? So for players who, kind of just want some clear understanding of how do I get stronger, the enhancement levels are for you, right? If you see the number get big, you know you're getting stronger. Number go up, I'm getting stronger. Number go down, what's wrong? I'm not getting stronger. Why am I getting weaker? And so that's just really good for people who don't quite understand or grasp how powerful mods are. Um, Now, for another goal, we want to give in-game players goals to push for, right? So in-game players know how powerful mods are. They know that getting a bunch of mods on an item is just like a game over, man. It's game over, right? Like this is how you pew pew people in PvP. This is how you shave extra time off in lockouts, or straight up just be able to go in with one or two less people. They've already accepted the gospel of modifications. So what we want here for them is we want them looking at higher quality level items and going, ooh, how would this be with the exact mods I want? Right? And getting that hunger for a really good higher quality level item. That means they're more likely to try to get multiple copies of them. That means those copies of them aren't just sitting around. People are actually snapping them up and using them to upgrade their other items. And we're like really supercharging the player base's appetite for strong gear. This also gives them another progression path, right? Because the thing about like increasing the power of the mods this way is a big portion of the power is going to come from just leveling them up early, right? Getting a couple of enhancements or neuroforging in, right? You do it a couple of times, you're getting a big chunk of power. The last kind of couple percentage points of power, or so maybe like the last 20 or 30%, I'm spitballing numbers, is going to come from really grinding out the Neuroforge, right? And that depends on the quality level of the item that you're um, using, right? Because a low quality level item, you're going to have to really throw a lot into it. Higher quality level item, you won't have to throw as much into it, but it'll still be good. And so this really should help give in-game players clear goals, clear reasons to push for that. Um, I think I kind of talked about this last point already, right? We want to take a long time to max out high quality gear, but high quality should be better than quality gear, and that's what this does. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about Ranger, the sniper rework. All right, taking another sip of water. All right, so why would we rework sniper? Let's just be real here. Sniper on live is super niche. There are certain people who play it, and when they play it either because it allows them to do things that other classes can't do with its super long range and low visibility and high damage scaling from the sniper and analyzer. Um, you kind of can fire weapons from further away that people don't get to fire from further away. You also get to hit better with certain weapons that have really bad tracking, and so because of that, you can just shoot things in ways and places and spaces that don't make any sense for another class to try. But this doesn't feel all that good. As a sniper, you're constantly balancing on a razor's edge between I can kill this thing and oh wait, I'm dead. Um, you don't have the defensiveness to take hits. You don't have the mobility to kind of dodge things and dictate the fight. You know, you rely on warpers and tweaks and other items to kind of provide you with good maneuverability. And you really just have to build like pure DPS in order to do anything. Um, that feels bad most of the time in a solo situation. In a group situation, you just go pure damage. You try to get the biggest damage bonus you can get to sustain that you can sustain. Um, and you just shoot stuff to gain analysis on the target. And yeah, you're a turret. You just click a target, you hold down spacebar, and you blow it up. And if you have a very finely tuned setup and you've built around that, it works. Like when it works really good, and you can kill almost anything. Um, but when it doesn't work, it sucks. Like it really sucks. And so the optimal playstyle for sniper, because of that, because of the range, the tracking, the stealth, right? It's just not interactive, right? You're not making moment-to-moment decisions about what you focus. You're not um, able to see things that are like potentially attacking, going to attack you, right? Like it's not on the screen. Um, if you are attacked by something, you're probably dead. Like not much you can do. You're probably going to die. And if you just get to wallop on something, you know, from range, it's probably gonna die. Um, and it's just not interactive. It's not engaging. It's powerful, but it's not engaging. So what's Ranger? Well, Ranger is less range reliant. That's one of the first things we realize. It's tough to make see, something that's important to kind of explain here, which I think I might do, is it's tough to make content when players can trend and are encouraged to trend towards an extreme. If players are encouraged to play around the maximum amount of range they can get, which is 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000, 11, 12, etc., um, then we have to start making changes to content that make it so that playing at that range is not trivial, right? But this also makes it tougher for other classes that don't get that much range, right? So the more range a particular class gets to have, right, relative to other classes, the more ridiculous stuff we have to do to try to make a challenge for that class that other classes, you know, have to end up trying to deal with. So we don't want Ranger to be as range reliant, and also we just don't think it's very good to be sitting multiple screens away from a fight, right, shooting everything down. Like, and the fact that you have to is bad. So you don't have to anymore. Okay. Um, let's see. So self sufficiency. Um, because of less range reliance, we have increased its self sufficiency, right? We've given it these little bonuses um, to help it be more self-sufficient when it comes to energy. We've given bonuses to make it more self-sufficient when it comes to its survivability. We've given bonuses to make it more self-sufficient when it comes to its maneuverability, right? We want Ranger to be able to do its own thing and be okay. And if it has some support, great. It loves support. If it doesn't have support, okay, fine. I'll do it myself, right? It's like kind of like Thanos putting on his gauntlet. You know, it's like I'm tired of you. I'm gonna go do it myself. That's what Ranger is. Um, we also wanted it to have more upfront power universally. So in situations where you kind of need to make moment to moment decisions, you need to be able to exert your power like that, like instantly. Um, and the old range sniper did not have this, right? The sniper analyzer, if you tried to react to a situation, you would lose your power buff. You'd lose your bonus. You just kind of like, it's like think of it like, being a Super Saiyan or whatever, right? Like you charge up, you get stronger, and you're in this fight. But if you lose focus, if you change your focus, then boom, you lose your power. And it can feel really bad because a mistake can cause that to happen. Having some sort of pressure, right? Some dangerous mob or whatever that comes in that you need to fight in a PVE encounter, and needing to switch to that, like it just sucks. It feels bad to have that happen, and you never want to do it. So Ranger does not require you to do that anymore. We have decided that we do not like this idea of having to sit and focus on the target, and never break focus in order to uh, be effective, right? And so that combined with wanting to give it more upfront power kind of drove us towards some of the decisions we made. Now, it's important to mention like there is less long-term power in specific situations, very niche situations. So people who've played Sniper on live know about getting to max analysis and then popping, rate of fire tweaks, et cetera, right? Like that's not something that this, Ranger implementation is going to really benefit from as much, right? It has changed pretty dramatically, like the class and the way it squeezes out extra, dribbles of power. That's changed. So let's talk about what those changes are. So first, damage ramping mechanics. So Ranger has something called an empowered shot, and an empowered shot is basically it's a shot that does more damage. It's a bigger glow, or a bigger visual effect. It has a little indicator, and it's got a little sound that goes with it. And when this empowered shot hits, it's chunky. It does some good damage. The damage of an empowered shot basically takes your the damage of your weapon, and then it does some fancy math with critical strikes and critical strike chance and turns that into just straight up damage. Sorry, critical strike chance and critical strength. Sorry. And so you get strong shots. Just every 5 seconds, you get a strong shot. This is granted to you via something called the Ranger Scope. So as long as you have the Ranger Scope equipped and the Ranger Scope is charged up, you get an indicator, you get an empowered shot. Whatever you shoot, you put a you do that damage to the target, right? This critical chance, critical strength damage bonus to the target. You'll notice that rate of fire has nothing to do with that, right? If you are using an empowered shot, you don't care about rate of fire. When that little indicator lights up, you're not trying to shoot as many shots as you can. You're trying to get one nice, strong, chunky shot into a target. So that's what empowered shots do. Marks. Now, when we made empowered shots, we said, okay, we've got this upfront oomph, like this pew pew strong shot. How do we turn this into something that is a damage ramping mechanic? Well, what if when you shoot a target, you get to do more damage to it based on how many times you shot it? That would be a great damage ramp, right? It's basically how the sniper analyzer works. Okay, so we went there and then we said, okay, let's take it further. Let's say that every time you hit with this really strong shot, the damage that you do with that shot is saved onto the target. So again, remember, it's not your DPS, it's just the damage. The damage that you do with that shot is saved onto the target. And so we let you stack 6 of those shots up. So you can get 6 marks on a target. Every time a mark is added, all of the other marks are triggered. So you can do 6 times the damage multiplied by the crit chance and crit strength. It's not a clear, straightforward formula. It's like there's a little bit of complicated math behind it. So you're not literally going to have, double the damage if you have 100% crit chance and double the damage if you have 100% crit strength. There's some ratios, um, but you just get to do 6 times that damage once you've reached full marks every 5 seconds. Just constant, 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 constant in perpetuity against that target. And so, because we are storing the damage on the target, and because the empowered shots will apply a mark to whatever they hit, and their maximum damage is per target, we can just let you switch targets freely, right? You can just decide, hey, I'm gonna stop shooting the boss now, and I'm gonna go shoot this big bad that just spawned. I think it needs to die, and you get to keep your marks on the boss. Granted, there's a little bit of a decay, right? They decay over time slowly, like very very slowly. So you could be shooting something else for about a minute or two, and you still have some marks on the boss. And so there's less of a feels bad like moment when you decide to swap targets around. And we think this is important because it will give you more agency. It will give you more upfront power. It will allow you to be more interactive. It will encourage, well, maybe not encourage, but it will allow you to be more interactive and reward being more interactive. So let's talk about some defensive changes, right? What we needed to do more than just change the damage mechanics of Ranger or of Sniper in order to make a class that like people would have fun playing, right? Damage is one thing, but how much damage do you do when you're dead? I want the answers to that at the end of this class. The answer is 0, right? So in order to be a powerful class, you need to be able to take some hits or maybe avoid those hits, right? Speed Demon can just dodge things. Seer can be invisible. Berserker just says, I don't care. Ooga Booga presses lifesteal, goes back to full health, right? Well, that's not really what happens, but it's close enough. So Ranger needed its own thing, right? It's a combat-focused class. It's intended to kind of stay in the fight like a Berserker, right? And that's kind of where we started from. It's like, okay, Ranger should stay in the fight. You should not be running away from a fight as a Ranger. You should be trying to finish the fight. And so I was actually the one who kind of suggested this idea. Early on in the process of trying to figure out what we were going to do with Ranger during our long meetings, I was like, hey, what if we just give Ranger the ability to like shrug off damage? Like any damage it takes, it just says, nope, I'm not dying immediately. I'm just gonna take that damage later, right? And at first, we were kind of skeptical, like, does this work? Is this gonna be good? Like, why would anyone care about that? Why would anyone want to do that? But the thing is, it's actually really strong. And it's really strong for a couple of reasons. So I'll go into why. So here's how it works. Ranger gets an ability or a skill called True Grit. It's the third subskill, right? So it's under Ranger Class 3. Every level of True Grit gives you like 20% of the damage that you take gets converted into this grit. Parasite does true damage to you. And then you get like 10% damage and 10% shield regeneration in Heavy Fighter. Okay, so Grit is at max 60% damage. 60% of the damage that you take just straight up is delayed, right? You just take that damage over 30 seconds from a parasite. So this is a pretty powerful thing already, right? Like any damage you take is just delayed. This makes regeneration, right? Shield regeneration really good. It makes being healed really good, right? Like if you take some stray damage, you take some damage, right? It allows the healers and your own shields to kind of like, come in and triage and kind of extend your life. So that's pretty good right by itself. But we said, yeah, this is not enough. We need to take it one step further. We need to go a little further beyond. So we also made it so that when you have grit on you and you kill the target that gave you grit, any grit that the target put on you is immediately wiped. Yes, you heard that right. We literally said if you kill the thing that fought you or shot you or hit you and did damage to you and put grit on you, and you kill it, all of its damage is gone, right? So if you get ambushed and something drops a bunch of damage into you, right, tweaks up, does its thing, and then you find some way you like you're part of the kill, you kill the thing, all that damage is wiped. And so this is really, really strong, right? This really kind of pushed it from, oh, okay, well, I guess, Ranger kind of wants to stay in the fight. Like, they can stay in the fight because they're not going to die immediately, right? Like, so they can just fight the thing and then they'll bleed out with the grit, right? That's like, oh, yeah, I guess I'll stay in the fight, right? I mean, I'm not going to die yet. Changed it from that to, oh, if I kill the thing, I don't take any more damage, right? So in a weird way, it's kind of like reverse lifesteal, right? If lifesteal lets you regain health that you lost, grit lets you nullify damage you already took, which is pretty cool, right? And so it's gonna play a little bit differently than Berserker, right? Like you're gonna be tankier in shorter fights than a Berserker is, um, but if the fight goes on too long, then yeah, you're not going to be tanky at all, right? It's not resistance to damage. After 30 seconds, you have taken the damage that it did, right? That's just it. Um, and so in combination with that shield regeneration bonus that I told you about on True Grit, we also gave it some shield regeneration on the Zen of Ranger skill, right? So that's going to give you like a nice amount of regen. It's a little bit more than 100%, I think. And so that's going to, in combination with True Grit, really going to let you be kind of aggressive and take risks and play more like a Berserker and less like a Seer, right? Like you're a combat class, you should be fighting things. You should not be afraid to just stand your ground and fight. And so that's kind of what we wanted with this. We also decided that we didn't want Ranger to just be a sitting duck in a turret, but we did want them to kind of sit in one place and shoot a bit. So we gave it a mobility bonus when it's going less than 40 speed. So the aforementioned skill Zen of Ranger is going to give you double the speed and double the thrust when you are moving less than 40 speed. This is to give you the opportunity to kind of get out of the way, right? If you're fighting something, you get to just move and get out of the way. But you don't get to keep it for long. It's like 2 seconds or something. And so when you thrust, right, you get this massive like you just get the rocket forward. It feels really cool. But then after that you lose it, and then you have to kind of go slow again in order to get your in order to get like the thrust bonuses again. Now because we didn't change the second sub skill, which gives you like some range and some damage from being slow or not moving, right? You're still going to want to sit in order to get the maximum bonuses you can get. But you don't have to, right? We've kind of significantly reduced the amount of damage you lose, and you don't gain as much range from being still, right? So you're gonna be able to really kind of shake things up and play in ways that you want with this, right? So what are the nerfs? Well, we reduced the range that you got from not moving, just straight up. Like we don't want you shooting from as far away. We tried to be conservative with the amount of range that we reduced, and we hope that we did a good job with that. I already explained earlier why we don't like super long range. Tracking. I already explained earlier why we don't like really high tracking. It means that turning bonuses don't matter as much. It means that a player actively kind of aiming things and figuring out what they want to shoot and how they want to shoot like doesn't matter, because now you have like projectile weapons that are just like moving around like, I don't know, like heat-seeking missiles, right? It's kind of weird. And then visibility. We've lowered the visibility of the class, and at the same time, we also kind of removed sources of flat visibility from like spotty beams and fires and things like that, right? So you're not going to be revealed as easily. So you can still use stealth to kind of stalk things and kind of get into place, but you're not going to be super invisible anymore. I mean, you can make a setup that's invisible, right? Super low visibility. There's nothing stopping you from doing that, but you don't just get that for having the ranger skill anymore. This is not that big of a nerf, honestly. Like when you really compare it, there are going to be some niche situations where you'll be seen, um, where otherwise you wouldn't. And I don't literally mean like you're not going to notice it. Yes, you're going to notice the visibility nerf. That is it. That is what I'm saying. But all of the other changes in combination will make it so that when you notice it, you will still be stronger in a lot of other ways. Um, if you don't try to play the super stealthy sniper, super long range sniper, right? You're gonna have to shift your playstyle again. This is a rework. This is a rework. I'm gonna say that one last time. This is a rework of the class. You will have to change how you play if you want to be optimal. Um, we don't yet know exactly what optimal looks like, but we do know that trying to play super long range, super stealthy, um, sniper, right, doesn't it's not the most optimal. It can work. You can make it work. You can figure it out, but it's not going to be the best. Okay, so what we saw in live for a long time with sniper is that everybody wanted to use light fighters. Why? I don't know. Maybe it's because light fighters have 4 augmenter slots, and augmenter slots are the thing that allow you to scale your damage up to bajillions. Well, okay, not bajillions. That's a lie, but to the millions. And you got to have a lot of range too, because a lot of the good DPS augs, ult obliteration, my bastard child. I'm looking at you. Um, right, has a ton of range. So of course you're going to use um, ships that allow you to have lots of augs so that you can benefit from that. We want you to use a heavy fighter most of the time. This is a combat focused class. As a combat focused class, that means that you should be in the thick of things. If you're in the thick of things, or if you're fighting things, you're probably going to want some resist. We probably want you to use big weapons. We want you to use big shields. We want you to use big energies, right? We want you to use big stuff. So heavy fighters have space for that. So get in a heavy fighter. Thank you. No, I know that's not enough. I know that you're not going to get in a heavy fighter just because I tell you to. So here's what we did. As the aforementioned True Grit skill was said, your 10% per level shield regeneration and damage are locked to heavy fighter, but also the grit bonus, right? The ability to turn 60% of your damage, of your pre-mitigation damage, into grit, is relying on you being a heavy fighter. No heavy fighter, no true grit. Also, we have added a skill. We've replaced Ranger Class 2 so that now it gives you double the overloader bonus when you're inside of heavy fighter. So if you really want to have this really kind of rangy build where you like have a bunch of range, okay, fine. Use a long range overloader and you'll get twice the stats. If you want to be a close range brawler, okay, fine. Use a overloader that gives you minus range, like the I think it's luminous vexating potentiation analyzer, something like that. Whatever the heck it's called. I made the item. I don't remember the name. Sue me. But it's there and you can use it, and I know people have used it. And so this will allow you to play Ranger in a way, that you want. And you just swap an overloader out, which is kind of cool, right? Being able to kind of flex your build and your playstyle based on the overloader you used. I think it's cool. And I think it's going to result in more people changing their playstyle mid-fight, right? And having maybe some weapons on their ship that they use for upfront fighting. Could be. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe none of that happens and everybody just tries to make Invis Sniper works and this whole thing is a failure and, it's crap. But I don't think so. So we'll see what happens. Okay, moving on. Gunner. Ho 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 ho. Okay, so Gunner. Actually, let me get a sip of water really fast. I think I should do that. Okay, so Gunner. Why change Gunner? I'm just gonna be honest here. We curb stomped Gunner. I think it was a couple universes ago. Actually, a couple years at this point. We took Gunner out back and beat the heck out of it, and it is a shadow of itself. It's never been quite the same. Um, we did a lot to Gunner. Anyone who played Gunner for a long time knows that Gunner has had so many changes. It's been on a roller coaster ride. Largely, this is my fault. Um, I was advocating for changes to Gunner a long time ago, back when we made like on-hit weapons like Splash and Chain and stuff have like really high recoil and high damage, and that caused us to like change things a bunch. And I was advocating for like the Gunner Analyzer. If anyone remembers the Gunner Analyzer, it basically it made you tankier as you were shooting more things for longer. But also there was this weird bug where you could kind of equip it and unequip it, and it would give you like super high rate of fire. You could just like break the rate of fire cap. Funny enough, we actually fixed that bug. So if we ever wanted to add something like the Gunner Analyzer again, we could. Um, Not saying we will, just saying we could because we fixed it. But that's an example of one of the things. At one point, Gunner just did a lot of damage, and the Death Blossom hit a lot of targets, and it didn't cost any electricity, and it didn't have a range cap, and it propagated on hit effects at one point. Like you could literally like use splash or chain weapons or whatever, and then the Gunner's Death Blossom would like trigger those as well. Um, and missiles made you like 45% weaker to incoming damage. Gunner was really strong. Um, for a while, it was only strong against lots of clump targets, and and it kind of sucked whenever you had to fight one thing. So then we changed it and gave it a lot of really good short single target damage. But then, oh boy, the Death Blossom was really good. So then we changed the Death Blossom again, and oh wow, the Death Blossom's not that good. But oh wait, if I do enough damage, I can just wipe squads and things. And so we've reached to what we've reached the level that we are at now, where only really highly invested gunners get to have fun. If you are a highly invested gunner on live right now, you are blowing things up. You are doing good damage. You are strong. You feel like Thor or Odin. You're a god of war. Everybody else is eating crumbs. Um, and so that's kind of why we wanted to change it, right? Gunner is in the spot where one way of playing it is de facto the best way. Get the biggest damage mods you can get. Make sure you have a lot of range, and just do DACA, more DACA, right? DACA, 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 DACA. So here's what we decided to do about that. So first of all, we realized that we kind of made the power that comes from having a gunner in your squad kind of lackluster. You used to just give 45% more damage, right? So damage vulnerability on the target from missiles. You used to give 45% more damage just for hitting targets with missiles, whether they were, you know, radius, like AoE missiles or not. Um, and you could really kind of shred people with that. That contributed to a lot of gunners' damage and squads and by itself and so on and so forth. And so we said, okay, it's at 25% now. It's not really that great. Well, actually, it's at 15%. And then if you take the advanced class subskill, it's 25. But that's neither here nor there. It's not really that great. So how can we preserve gunner weakening things, but also not just make it press this button and then get bonus damage against this thing, no matter how strong you are? So what we decided was, after some conversation, one of us had kind of came up with this really cool idea of keeping track of the damage that gunner did against the target, and then allowing other squad members to benefit from that damage in some way. So the gunner's weapons leave like fractures in the target, and then other squad members, other allies, can shoot the target and benefit from those fractures. So any damage the gunner does, those allies also benefit from that damage. And so we played around with it for a little while, and we thought, okay, yeah, this can work. So what we've got now is when a gunner shoots a target and it does 100 damage, its allies are eligible to have 700 damage added to their damage, right? Like you can have 700 damage added to the damage of your squad. Now, granted, if your ally does 100 damage, no, it is not going to do 800 damage because you added the 700 to it. No, no, no. It will do 100% more damage. It can do up to 100% more damage. That's how many gunner fractures it can consume. And so every ally you have can consume more and more based on its damage, and then the gunner's damage scales up. And so you've got this relationship where the damage of the gunner in high end squads needs to be some proportion of their damage in order to significantly buff them. So you don't want to be bringing a kind of weak undergeared gunner. You want to have a good gunner in a squad so that it can really buff things up. So we did this because mainly we want gunner to have to upgrade, right? Like we don't want you bringing a character that is not very well upgraded and like significantly buffing your squad. It's not as interesting with a class that is expected to use weapons. I mean, gunner, right? Like it sounds like a class that does damage, right? So you should be wanting to do damage in order to support your allies with it. Now, this brings up an issue, right? If we balance Gunner around doing damage and buffing its allies, and it gets a massive damage buff um, to its allies, then what happens when there's no allies around? How does it do its damage, right? And so at that point, it's like, okay, well, maybe this is what missiles are for. Missiles, fighters, and bots, okay? So these things won't add marks, but they will consume them. So if a gunner does good damage, then its bots can do good damage, and its missiles can do good damage, and its fighters can do good damage. So we have a situation where a gunner without a squad is able to use a nice chunk of their damage, of their fractures, sorry, just by using missiles and fighters and bots. And so missiles and fighters also get a bonus to the amount of damage that they can consume. So normally, like a bot can only do double damage, right? A player can only do up to double damage, but but a missile and a fighter get to do up to 160% damage. And then we have an advanced class subskill that I think it's like missile mastery or something that lets them do up to 2x. So basically, they can do triple their damage by consuming gunner marks, whereas other things can only do double their damage by consuming gunner marks. So this should make gunners with assets, right? Gunners that play like a kind of like a fleet commander, almost like an offensive fleet commander, really powerful. Um, and this is going to lean even more into the fleet aspect of gunner, right? It is a fleet focused class. It is this idea of like roaming around with a group, and if you don't have a group, you make your own group. Um, and we wanted to lean into that. We wanted to make sure it was clear that the gunner is supposed to be a supportive fleet focused class. Okay, so we did that with the gunner marks, right? Now Death Blossom. Um, Man, this is going to be real complicated. I'll see if I can make it simple. Death Blossom was overpowered. It's just the original version of Death Blossom was overpowered. Um, the version that's on live right now, as of this video, is kind of bad unless you do a lot of damage on your main gunner, and then you're just basically doing the same damage to like 5 other targets or something, or maybe it might be a little bit more. It's kind of like you have to. Okay, let me say it like this: you have to sit back and play like a turret. You, as a gunner, as a slow ship, have to be sitting far away from things in order to in order to apply your damage, because your firing arc for the Death Blossom is like just your frontal arc, basically. It's like a big frontal arc, unless you're using full tracking laser beams. Okay, so that encourages you to sit back, but you're slow. So if the fight comes to you, you can't do anything. You can't move unless you like warper away and use tweaks, etc. It also means you have to have lots of range bonuses. You have to play from range, preferably off screen. That's kind of boring, right? And also it means that if you're doing multi-target damage from range, it can be kind of crazy, right? Like you're just sitting back as an artillery. And when you're allowed to do that, it feels great. When you're not allowed to do that, you feel like, what the heck am I doing, right? Like, what's going on here? So we needed to change the Death Blossom for that reason. Another reason that the Death Blossom was really good, but sucks now, is that it used to allow you to just propagate on hit effects. You could straight up splash 5 targets that were sitting on top of each other and cause each of their splash to splash onto each of them. So you would do like 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 it would be multiplicative, um, or exponential is the right word. You could do exponential amounts of damage by stacking things, getting things to be stacked on top of them, and using like splash or AOE effects. Um, that was kind of nuts because it meant you killed things faster when they were sitting next to each other or when they were close, which is kind of silly, um, right? Like a little silly. So we made some adjustments to that too. And finally, you used to be able to use your Death Blossom on the bots, but you weren't allowed to anymore because that was also really strong. The Death Blossom, the old Death Blossom, also, just to be fair, right, to be completely transparent, it had some issues with lag. So if you had like fighters and drones and stuff in the galaxy, it would significantly increase the amount of objects in the galaxy that the Death Blossom had to kind of iterate through, and that just made it take longer for that information to be sent back to the player. It made it take longer for that galaxy to kind of do its thing, and it just made things really slow. It contributed to lag. So we made some changes. So first off, the Death Blossom is not called the Death Blossom anymore. We're calling it the targeting computer, the advanced targeting computer. No, this is not the same thing as that overloader in the game. I think it's like Tech 15. That's a targeting computer. No, this is the advanced targeting computer. And it allows you to shoot at extra targets, a couple of them. And it does like a fraction of your damage for each shot, you know. I think it's like 25% with the normal one. And you get 4 extra shots. And you can shoot at 4 extra targets for 25% of the damage that you do. You can shoot at them no matter what direction they're in if you are not using beams, right? So you can shoot at things that are directly behind you. It does respect the tracking of beam weapons. You have a limit to the amount of range that you that it can hit targets, right? It can't shoot past a certain range. But in exchange, you get some cool stuff. So first off, it can apply on hit effects. So yes, we brought back, you can do on hit effects to multiple targets again. This is probably okay. I mean, like an extra 4 shots, 25% damage. You're basically MF2ing, right? Like when you use this, you get to MF2, but instead of MF2ing at the same target all the time, you can MF2 extra targets. Also, it can strike the same target. So if you're kind of close, or if there's only 2 targets, then all 4 of those extra shots will be fired at something. So you're never going to waste damage. So in situations with lots of AI and splash and chain, yeah, your damage is going to be a little bit lower. But in situations where there's only 1 or 2 targets, your damage is going to be higher, right? And so we've given it more consistency in exchange for really dramatic highs. The range limitations, I mentioned that already. Bots, we are now allowing you to put the Death Blossom on your bots. Right now, we're just locking it to capital ship only, so you can only put it on capital ship bots. I think that's fair considering capital ships only have 2 augmenter slots, so their offensive power is not as much as other ship hull types. And yeah, right, like you get to splash everything and hit everything with your gunner, apply marks, and then your bots get to hit everything and consume the marks. Oh, I forgot to mention, the Death Blossom does propagate gunner marks. So yes, you can propagate gunner marks with the Death Blossom. Pretty cool. Okay, so what are our goals here? Take a sip of water, 1 second. Okay, so first, build options. You should be able to build gunner in a variety of ways, right? You can go full on damage, right? You're just like, I'm going full damage, boom, boom. I just want to do damage, as much damage as I can to targets, and that's it. Just blow them up, right? Okay, great. That works, right? You'll put a lot of marks on things, and then you let other people just consume them. You can decide you want to go more of a tanky playstyle, right? I forgot to mention it, but we also gave Gunner some shield regen buffs to go along with the shield regen it has in Fleet Focus. So it can have lots of shields, and it can have a pretty good amount of regen. So you can go a more bulky, kind of tanky playstyle and say, well, I'm going to grab the aggro of everything. I'm going to debuff it. And then I'm going to use my missiles and stuff to, put crowd control effects on the targets and let my allies fight them. Right? You can play a more tanky playstyle. Um, you can play a completely kind of solo, selfish playstyle where, like, in a solo situation, you are, um, right, like you're doing just enough damage to like that's been balanced against the damage that your bots and your missiles and your fighters do. So you can kind of like grind through things, take their aggro, and then your bots and missiles and fighters kind of mop everything up. So there's lots of different ways, right? Like basically what this does is it makes it so that high damage, the difference between a high damage gunner and a lower damage gunner are equalized in a bit, right? They're not equal, but they are closer. And so you can still do a lot of damage as a gunner. Um, Even if you don't have full DPS bonuses. Now, you need some, otherwise you don't put marks or fractures on things. But, you know, overall you're gonna feel better. You're not gonna feel as bad. So this opens up more playstyle options, right? So you can be in the thick of things. You can be right in the middle of everything, blasting everything with like beam weapons or like pulse guns or mag cannons or whatever your weapon you prefer. You can be far out using low tracking beams or torpedoes, right? You can play like a mobile gunner style and kind of like try to get close to a single thing with shorter range weapons and just blast it like with all of your all of your shots shooting it at the same time. It actually looks really cool. Um, to like have all of your shots shooting out of your ship from different spots and like hitting the target. It looks really cool. So all these different things are possible. And also like solo versus group, like the way that you play in a solo situation where you have your bots and stuff is probably going to be a little bit different than when you're in a group, right? Um, you're going to want to take most of the damage, and so you need to be bulky. Because you can rely on your assets to do a lot more damage, and your survivability just allows you to continuously pump marks into them or fractures into them. Maybe you'll want to flex into that. It depends, right? So we're gonna see a lot of different playstyle options. We're gonna see a lot of different build options, and we're gonna see people playing a little bit different when they're by themselves versus when they're with other players. This isn't that different from what people have to do on live, but going double DPS augs on live is pretty much the way you do it, right? It's the de facto way to do it, almost all the time, and you figure it out. In any other circumstance, you kind of figure out how to make it work. You don't necessarily have to do that, and so early game gunners who are just kind of getting started, gunners who don't know how to min max everything or don't have access to those min maxed bonuses and augs can feel powerful and feel good and have goals to strive towards. It's easier to have a goal to strive towards when you kind of get why you should have the goal. So all this should tie together in a way that makes Gunner more interesting, more engaging, and less crazy on the very tippy top end of the scale. Okay, let's move on to critical hit resistances. So, critical hit resistances. Oh boy. Oh man. Okay. What happened to precision? Let's start with that. So, a while ago, we had this idea of replacing critical hit resistances with a stat called precision. And what precision was supposed to do was it was supposed to make it so that your crit chance was not based on having 100% crit, and your crit damage was not based on stacking crit. It was just a smooth linear increase in crit DPS. So 1 precision was 1% more DPS, 100 precision was 100% more DPS. And it would approach 100% but never reach it. And as it got closer to getting to 100%, it would get harder and harder. So getting in reality, it was probably going to make it so that when you get to like 50 or 60%, you don't get very much crit chance anymore. You get a lot of crit strength. Um, we didn't do this because it would have massively changed everything, and we were not confident that we could get players um, on board with something like that. This would like just completely change the stat system. It's kind of like when we added armor. If anyone was around during the healing revamp when we had armor, um, it was it was a big change. It could have worked if we had started off like that. I think the game would have probably been fine. But people are already used to resistance to damage. And in the same situation is here. The situation is the same here, right? People are used to critical hit chance and critical hit strength. Going to precision would have been really weird and would have been really difficult to kind of replicate what we saw on live. So we backed off from that. We decided, oh wait, fine, we're not going to do anything to crit. Then I started thinking about how important it was to have ways to kind of push players, to do things other than stack the bejesus out of critical hit strength. It's fine if some people want to do that. It's fine if stacking critical hit strength is viable in some situations, in some classes, etc. But if every single class just does it all the time and is like only interested in stacking critical hit strength as high as you can get it because you can get a ton of crit chance easily, you can get 100% crit chance easily and guarantee crit, then like it's not interesting. It's just it might as well be plus damage, because it's not a chance to get extra damage. And so once you get to 100% crit, you don't really have anything to do on live, right? Like there are some situations where you might want some extra crit if you're fighting like a capital ship or heavy fighter, but for all intents and purposes, crit has a cap, and the cap is 100%, give or take 20 or 25% depending on what you're fighting. And so we didn't like that. We don't like stat ceilings. We don't like it when you get to a stat that you theoretically could just keep adding more of, but you don't want to because after a certain point it just doesn't do anything. So we did what we did. We decided we were going to add more crit resistances, to all the ship classes, starting from, I think we started from like Tech 21 and up. Then after some feedback from players, we accepted that we didn't need to immediately ramp things up as quickly as we did. So we shifted it and started it from Tech 22 and up. So the goal of this is basically to make it so that you don't have to, no, not you don't have to. So sorry. The goal of this is to make it so that you don't stop building into crit as you get to higher and higher tech levels, right? And as you get to higher and higher levels of like crit strength, you don't just stop at 100% crit chance. We don't like that, because it makes it predictable. So what this means effectively is that as you get to higher tech levels, you need more crit chance, and that means we can add more sources of crit chance. We can add more bonuses, right, to crit chance on a lot of different things. We can give more. We want to do this because it's not fun to just be stuck at giving 20% crit chance on AUGs and only being able to give like 10, 11, 12, 13% crit chance, right? So going forward, when you see items, you'll see more crit chance on them as we go up. Why did we start at Tech? Why did we start at Tech 22? Or why did we just start at Tech 25? All right. Um, I'll level with you. We didn't start at Tech 25 because if we started at Tech 25, the moment that you get Tech 25, you would have been fighting against things with huge amounts of crit strength because not crit strength, crit resist, right? Like think 100% or more, right? And that would just immediately smack any setup that you had in the face, and you would be like, wow, what is wrong with the devs? Like, why did they put this 150% crit, 150, 175, 200% crit resist AI in our face, right? We wanted to affect the meta starting now. We're already giving you a ton of damage bonuses from the Neuroforge. We're already giving you lots of buffs. In fact, in some cases with some classes, we're buffing the heck out of them. We want to set the foundation for this world where crit strength is not to just stack as much as you can bonus and like win, where you actually had to think about the AUGs that you were using in the gear and not just the AUG mods in order to actually consistently crit against higher tech ships. And then in higher tech levels, we don't want you to crit 100% of the time. Like really, like maybe some classes and some builds will be able to do that, but not everyone, right? We don't really want to do that. And so that's why we did it, right? We don't want you critting all the time. We want crit chance and crit strength to be a DPS increase. We like that as a DPS increase. We like that it makes you stronger as you stack it. We don't want you to get 100% crit chance all the time. And getting 100% crit chance all the time, it makes critical hit strength just straight up like a guaranteed damage increase, right? Rather than a increase that happens sometimes. We want you to have chunky hits sometimes. Um, and so that's what the whole point of this is, right? Like you're going to crit, just not as often. And this means that things like minus crit might be okay, right? Maybe if we add a source of minus crit, maybe you're willing to take that on because maybe you have way more crit than you really need to crit more often than you would. Oh my goodness, to crit more often. And that's just the reason why. That's the reason why we did it. Um, the thing to remember is that this is going to be most impactful to high critical hit strength setups. So anything that really has like a ton of crit strength. So let's say you have like, I don't know, 500% crit strength. If you're fighting against like a light fighter or support fighter at Tech 23, you can expect to deal 24% less damage if all you have is 100% crit chance. If you don't, if you have more than 100% crit chance, then that number goes down, right, as you approach 150% crit chance. It gets even stronger at, Tech 25. It's going to be like minus 36% damage if you have 100% crit chance because it has 100% crit hit resist and you have 500% crit strength. Um, Now, if you have, I don't know, if you have 100% crit strength, instead of minus 24% damage at Tech 23 against the Tech 23 target, it would be minus 11%. So what you can see is that the more crit strength you stack, the more crit hit resist is going to reduce your DPS. If you do not have um, crit, the crit chance at 100% plus the amount of crit hit resist. So for example, 100% crit hit resist means you need 200% crit chance, and then you get guaranteed crits again. Um, so this is going to like shift things around and move to that world that I was talking about earlier. Like I said, guaranteed crits too reliable, too predictable. Um, Messes up the value proposition of other stats. We can do all these different things, and this leads to something that I like to talk about called build diversity. Basically, if it is not as easy to get as much crit DPS as it is on live, if it's harder, and you need to give up some things, that means that you need to make more choices. And if you need to make more choices, then the break point for some people, the decision for them of like, okay, I'm going to get off of this ride now. Like, I've ridden the crit chance, crit strength bus for as long as I care to, and now I'm going to get off. That's different for everyone. Everyone's going to get off at a different stop. And that's going to show up in people's setups with different AUG choices, different gear choices, etc. And we think this is a good thing. Okay, so let's move on. Seer. Oh boy, Seer. So Seer is in a very interesting spot. Let's focus on why we want to change it. So Seer is like super duper feast or famine right now. You either kill your target or you don't. Right? So let me take another sip of water. Okay, so you either kill your target or you don't. Right? You kind of sidle up next to it. You get behind it, you pop your nanite device, and you just unload, right? You even pop your DPS tweaks during that time as well. And if you do enough damage, they're just gonna die. Just doesn't matter if they get healed, right? Doesn't matter. Not much matters, right? Maybe if they use a blocker, right? If they use a blocker tweak, then maybe they can stop you from killing them. But yeah, now you've traded cooldowns. Both of you have traded cooldowns, and you got to wait again to do it. So if they don't use a blocker tweak, if they don't have a way to keep you from killing them, they just die. If they do have a way to keep you from killing them, because your damage is kind of backloaded, or a lot of your damage is backloaded, you just kind of have to try again, killing something else after you recharge. That's not very fun. You don't have very much agency. You're like very cooldown reliant. Also, instant killing is bad, right? Killing something before it can react, bad. I'm sure players like to do it, right? Like everyone likes to instant kill things. People don't like being instant killed. Doesn't leave very much room for you to figure out what the heck happened or to like react, right? Using a blocker tweak is reaction, yes, but there are a lot of other things that people can use if they have the time to react, and having something that just straight up kills you no matter what you do if you don't block it is kind of goofy. Okay, and so when you don't have the nanite up, can't really do anything. We don't like that. Like we like that the Seer is like this executioning assassin. We like that it's efficient. We like that all of its damage bonuses are like, heavily DPE related, right? It's not like Speed Demon and Berserker, which has damage bonuses that um, don't increase its DPE, right? Um, Seer does, just like Ranger actually, just like Sniper. So it can be very efficient. So we want to keep that. We want to keep the role of Seer as an efficient executioner, right? You should be killing things and grinding them down. You should be like popping them when they get low. We also like that it's stealthy, but we want it to be maneuverable. We want you to kind of feel like a slower speed demon, right? But not really, because we don't want you to zoom. We want you to kind of move quickly, but not through speed. So how do we do this? Well, first, in order to make you an efficient executioner, we strip out crit chance from your class. Your class just, you don't have crit chance anymore. But we replace your nanite device and we replace your backstab devices with a remodulator. You just get it for picking up Seer. And so once every couple of seconds, you get a guaranteed critical hit. So much like the Ranger scope, you just equip the item, wait a few seconds, and boom. Anytime you shoot your next weapon, you get a critical hit. And so that can kind of like really gear you towards like just shooting things with slower firing weapons. Okay, now how do we make you move around quickly? Well, we let you charge your micro warper faster, right? We let you just charge your micro warper twice as fast. If you can charge your micro warper twice as fast, you can use it twice as much, and that helps you move. It's not like speed, right? Because speed lets you just move linearly. A micro warper blinks you from one place to another. This is a way to have mobility. That's what it does. You can even dodge things. Okay, so we've shifted away from the big crit and crit strength focus, right? You don't get these big crit chance bonuses for shooting things from an ambush. You don't get these big crit strength bonuses, right? Like, it's just not there. What we do instead is we add a execution feature where as the target's shields get lower, Seer does more damage, up to 100% more damage when the target is at 50%. Then we add an advanced class subskill that lets you do 35% more crit damage, crit strength, when it is under 50% shields. So you will hit very hard when things are at 50% shields or less. Also, we changed backstab. So if you get a single shot off on something's rear arc, right, the back half of its ship, you just get a damage bonus for the next like 5 seconds. Just straight up. If you backstab something, you get a damage bonus. Now, once you get Seer Class 3, you get an upgrade which says that backstabs and ambushing are now the same thing. If I shoot something from stealth, I get the backstab bonus. If I shoot something in the back, I get the backstab bonus. So now you have the ability to really kind of make your class consistent, right? Right. Instead of being this like feast or famine thing where like, oh, am I going to get my bonus? Am I not going to get my bonus? You're going to get your bonus. You have control over whether or not you're going to get your bonus, right? Nothing can stop you from ambushing. Well, I guess maybe if you get killed or something lights you up or you're in the sun, I guess maybe you won't get it. And I guess if something doesn't let you ever get a backstab, you won't. But the chances of both of those things happening are very low. So that's a big deal. So we made some minor changes, right? So the aforementioned shield regeneration bonuses you heard about on Ranger and Gunner, they make an appearance here. We want you to use more regeneration shields if you want. We give you minus weight because minus weight is basically plus turning plus thrust, right? So good deal. You get to be stealthy and maneuverable by being lighter. Blame it on the psionics. Okay, minus radar. Minus radar is because we are also reducing the stealth of the Seer. We don't think Seer should be such a hard counter to stealth classes. Um, and we don't think that Seer should be so stealthy that you can't see it unless you have radar. It's like it's simple. That's the reason why. We just don't think it should be that extreme. Um, because extremes generally aren't very good. Because when someone builds to the extreme, it is very difficult to play around it. It's very difficult to design content around that. So this is a reduction in extremes. Plus range. Plus range is because in order to use your stealth well, you want to be further from the target. The further from a target you are, the less visible you are to them. And so if you can shoot things from further away, then you get to go back into being invisible faster because the visibility number that you need to be in order to not be seen can be higher, right, relative to that target. So that's just how visibility works in this game. So all of these things together kind of shift Seer away from this kind of like feast or famine, instant kill, cooldown reliant class into a class that can kind of hold its own. Um, Even if it kind of is seen, it still has these abilities to kind of get out of danger. Um, it can turn a fight, right? If something gets low, like the Seer can just decide, the hell with it, I'm gonna come out and just like fight you, and maybe I'll kill you, right? So all of these things are meant to give you more agency over the class and let you make decisions um, based on what's available to you. Okay, let's move on. Speed Demon. Okay, Speed Demon is just frankly a good example of what we want from a class, right? Like, it's very clear in its thematic style. You scoot, you shoot, you move, you groove, you zoom, you boom, right? Basically, you do damage and you go fast. So it only needed some small adjustments. And so here, what are the small adjustments? Well, you benefit from infinite rate of fire bonuses. Why do we do this? Frankly, because it sucks having weapons that we constantly have to tweak the recoil of, in order to make sure that a speed demon can use it. I don't like having to do that, right? It's not good. It's not fun, and also it just kind of feels thematic that if you're a speed demon, you want to be building into rate of fire. So instead of giving you tons and tons of rate of fire bonuses, we just make it so that if you use a weapon that has really low recoil, you get to continue to benefit from rate of fire bonuses. So now your damage is going to skyrocket and spiral up because of the rate of fire bonuses when you're past the rate of fire cap. Yeah, it'll cost you more electricity, but that's fine. Um, Target tracker. So we don't like the way that the target tracker kind of, again, like Seer, kind of fixed you to this cooldown uptime, right? Like, hey, if my cooldown's up, I get to do more damage. If not, I don't. Um, so we made some changes to that. So, right, like we gave it this projectile damage bonus because we want you to be using weapons that require some travel time, that might require aiming, um, that you can potentially miss, right? And we also give you a damage bonus because we know that with the target tracker gone, there is less power gained when you have like tweak bonuses and all these other things. So we're just giving you some more damage because we know that some amount of damage is necessary. We think 45% might be a good place. This might be too much. I don't know. Maybe maybe we'll cut it down after the patch, but we're going to look and see. So what we did to the target tracker is it makes projectiles fire at the target that you're tracking, or just in general actually, as if they were full tracking lasers. So that means they are going to shoot towards the target no matter what direction you're facing. And any speed that you're going at, if you're going at 700 speed, that speed gets added to the projectile velocity. And so your super slow pulse gun is now going plus 700 speed. The goal is to make pulse guns usable while maneuvering. So if you're like flying around dodging things, you should be able to pop the target tracker and voila, now you get to fly around and dodge and still do DPS. It's going to make mag cannons even better, right? Like because they get the speed bonus, and they're not going to have to curve and arc around. And beams are still going to be good against things that are highly mobile. You just won't get that double damage bonus from the target tracker, right? Like you're kind of going to have to play with projectile weapons more often. Another thing about this is because it like the target tracker can reset if you kill a target while it's up, you're going to be incentivized to kind of like keep killing things in order to reset it, if you're like fighting things that are kind of nimble and quick that you can burst down, then you get to use the target tracker over and over and over again. Um, and so this should make it so that Speed Demon feels pretty different from other classes, especially with the ability to really mess with your the type of weapons, the weapon behavior that you have. Okay, so let's look at recon focus. So we made some changes to this. I didn't mention them with Seer because I figured I'd just summarize them at the end. Like the other classes, we've changed its shield regeneration. Just recon focus has more shield regeneration. Has a bunch of it. Speed demon also gets some shield regeneration. So this should make it so that you really have a lot of self-sufficiency, just like gunner, just like ranger, right? Also, we've changed its advanced class subskill, right? So instead of expansion, it's giving a hull expander. You just get extra cargo slots, and you get an extra weapon slot. In exchange, we just put an extra hull expander on the class. Um, I mean, let's just be real here. Everybody who played Speed Demon or Seer took the extra hull expander thing, and if you didn't, I don't know why you're giving up a lot of hull space at higher tech levels. Um, so yeah, right. Like we just bake that in, right? If there's a must pick advanced class subskill, it probably needs to be changed, and that's just the idea that we've generally gone with, right? We don't want you picking an advanced class subskill because picking it makes the game like playable for you in a way that it didn't before. Um, Okay. Also, we removed the minus range on dogfighting. We don't need minus range anymore because your damage is not going to be super high with beams. And beams are instant hit. And because they're instant hit, having high range beams is kind of strong. So because of this projectile damage bonus and the target tracker being changed, we're like, yeah, we're not going to remove the minus range. You do what you want. If you want to shoot things from farther away, go ahead, do it. Right? Longer range weapons generally have less damage, right? And because you can't just increase their damage with the target tracker anymore, you'll have to figure out how to make that work. Okay, so like I said earlier, this is probably going to be a really strong class on release, but we're going to keep an eye on it. I'm pretty confident that Speed Demon is in a really good place after this. We thought that these changes would make it better without gutting the class, and we're looking forward to good things from it. Okay, I'm going to take a sip of water, and then we're going to go on to the next thing. Okay, let's go on. So, Berserker. I'm not going to mince words here. Berserker is overpowered. Um, yeah, like it's just overpowered, right? It's got a bunch of damage. It's really durable. It's fast, and it can lifesteal. Uh, you're strong. Don't lie. Tell the truth. We know you're strong. Okay, so you need to accept that we know. If you're a Berserker player and you love the class, and you're like, "Oh, I'm not strong. It's Berserker actually needs." No, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It doesn't need buffs. Um, so like because it can do all these different things, we've decided to make some adjustments to it, both positive and maybe a little negative. But I'll let you decide what that is for you. So its durability has been reduced baseline. Um, well, not baseline. It's been reduced with the advanced class subskill eye for an eye, but baseline has been increased. And for both of those, it's been significantly increased if things are shooting you from a frontal arc. So what does that look like? All right, so if you have no, if you don't have eye for an eye on live and on test, you have 45% resistance to damage about on live and 30% resistance to damage on test. So your resistance to damage is lower. No, I'm sorry. It's the opposite way. 45% on test, 30% on live. Okay. If you take eye for an eye on test, that's 7% more. So you just kind of multiply that number by 1.07. And if you do it on live, it's 25% more. So you multiply the 30% by 1.25. And that's how much resistance to damage you have. You can do that on your own. So basically, resistance to damage is stronger without eye for an eye. Now, if you take damage from the frontal arc, that damage is reduced by 30%. Just straight up reduced by 30%. This means that if you can keep things in front of you when they're doing damage to you, you're going to be taking a lot less damage than you would on live. Like, a lot less. And so Berserker should be significantly more durable if it can keep threats in its frontal cone. Now, an important thing to remember is that a minus 30% damage taken effect, like from the cone, from the shield in the front of it or whatever, is like roughly a 43% increase to effective shields and the power of healing and power of shield regeneration, etc. This is a very substantial buff because it basically means that Berserker takes like half damage in the frontal arc without eye for an eye, without that bonus from eye for an eye. That's really strong. So this means that any regeneration that you get, so if you're like using a regenerative shield, it is going to be twice as good. But even better than twice as good because resistance to damage affects the effective shields and effective shield regeneration. So if you care about that sort of thing, maybe you'll try out some sort of shield with some regeneration bonuses. And if you don't, then you won't. Yeah. Okay, so this is a nerf to Berserkers that never keep anything in their frontal arc and a buff to those that do. It's a pretty significant buff if you can keep most things or the dangerous things in your frontal arc. Okay, so Berserker. We reduced the speed on this. We went from 30% on this advanced class subskill to 10%. The reason why is because a long time ago when we made changes to the Berserker class, I think it was during the healing revamp, we took off the speed malice. So that minus speed that it got, we just removed it. But we didn't pay attention to the fact that the advanced class subskill gave 30% speed. And that was supposed to get you to a certain amount of speed with the Berserker speed malice, right? It was supposed to kind of get you just a little bit over 100% speed, like your baseline speed. Yeah, with this 10% from 30%, it gets you back to that relationship because we don't want you going really fast as a Berserker. You should not be chasing down AI going at max speed or speed demons going at 700 speed, right? Like it's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're not supposed to be doing that. This is going to reduce that. Now, I know I said you're not supposed to be doing that, but I mean you're not supposed to be doing that without actually gearing and auging for it specifically. If you want to do that, go ahead. Maybe you put some more power or some more stat allocation into speed, and you'll be able to do that, and you'll be fine. So generally, we don't think you should be fast and tanky and do high damage and have high durability because of lifesteal, right? Like that's kind of goofy. Okay, so speaking of lifesteal, we made lifesteal 10% as effective with on hits and parasites or fires. So that means if you have group targets or you have this target that you dump a bunch of fires into, you don't get to just pop the lifesteal device and like drain your shields back up to full, right? Like that's not how this works anymore. It can still increase your incoming shield stolen, but not by massive amounts. So when you're shooting lots of targets that all do lots of damage, you're gonna have to be more careful because your lifesteal is not gonna allow you to just face tank everything without worrying about dying. Right? You're not gonna be as safe in those situations. This doesn't change anything about for the on hits that is. It doesn't change anything about how you fight singular targets. But for the fires, it does, right? So with fires, if you're shooting something with a heat weapon and you put fires on it, it does change those things, right? It makes it so that you have to be actually hitting it with your weapons rather than just kind of letting it burn. So this means, wait, why did we do this? We did this because lifesteal is just overpowered. Like, it's really strong, and it's strong in so many different situations that it's hard to actually ascertain like why it's so strong. Like we know it's really strong and we know there's things we could do to it, but we want to trim away some of the situations where lifesteal is like clearly overperforming so that we can really see what is causing it to be so powerful. We have some ideas about like what to do such that it can't just be an immortal I win button. But we want to make sure that when we do that, that's the only thing we do, and we are very surgical in that. We have a history on the SS dev team, and I can say this because I was around for that. We have a history of over nerfing stuff, and being way too swingy with our changes. And lately, leadership on the dev team has kind of really pulled us back from that. We are not making as swingy changes. We're not taking big swings as much anymore because we know that it's really disruptive and generally not good for the game. Okay, so let's take a gander at what's next. Engineer. Okay, so engineer is really really interesting, because it doesn't benefit much from the Neuroforge offensively. And we're okay with this on release, right? We're gonna look into some options later on to allow for engineers to offensively um, use the Neuroforge, right, to increase their offensive power. But for right now, we're fine with that, right? Like, engineer is stupid strong out the gate. You get 4 AUGs on your ship that are passed on to your drones, and you get a drone controller, which is literally a fifth AUG. Drone controllers are an extra AUG. They have the same amount of AUG power allotted to them as an AUG. So you get 4 AUGs on your ship, which pass on to your drones, and then you get an AUG on your drone controller. So you get 5 AUGs. Like, nobody else gets 5 AUGs. Um, Engineers are strong. But with that strength means that they don't have as many options to scale their damage up. And if you are an engineer with like a lot of crit strength, then that means the damage loss from crit hit resists feels bad because you can't get extra crit chance. Like, unless you change your AUG setup. And then if you change your AUG setup, you're giving up all these other bonuses that are allocated in particular ways because AUG stats are not fungible. You can't just shift an AUG, sorry, not fungible, liquid. You can't just shift an AUG stat away from crit strength into like crit chance. It doesn't work like that. So we have increased the non-healing damage that engineers get for now. This should be a modest buff. I think it's like 10 or 15%, something like that. Don't. It's around there, right? Because we know that you don't have access to crit chance. Um, we will think about what we want future neuroforging to look like for engineer, and we'll get back to you about what that is. So we did make some other changes. So Droney no longer gives +1 drone. You just get 7 drones baseline for being an engineer. You're an engineer, you get 7 drones. That's it. So Droney now gives you 100% drone controller tweaking if you are not an engineer. And if you are an engineer, you get 15%. This is basically augmenter tweaking for your drone controller. Um, you can think of this as like augmenter tweaking, I don't know, like, let's say if augmenter tweaking 10 gives you 5%, then this would be like augmenter tweaking 30 for drone controllers. Yeah, that's basically how you should think about this. It's like if you're an engineer and you take this, your drone controller is getting augmenter tweaking 30. Pretty good, right? I think so. Um, okay, so also forgot to mention, Droney is no longer the thing that controls whether or not your drones inherit skills, right? So your drones are just always going to inherit skills. 50% of the skills out the gate, just done. That's it. No need for Droney. So this is pretty good for engineer. It's got a lot of little stats that it would love to pass on to its drones, and it's really good for other classes. So we're trying to, like, the reason why we did this is because we want um, other classes to think about using drones sometimes, and double drone controller tweaking, meaning your drone is controller just acts as 2 if you're not an engineer, um, should make other people think about using drones, right? Like, it makes them pretty good. Maybe. We'll see. Okay, so we're pretty happy with how engineer scales right now. It's really powerful out the gate. It does not scale as hard as the combat and recon classes, but that's just because it's not meant to be a combat class. It is a support focused class. And so as a support focused class, you don't scale as powerfully as the combat and recon classes do with offensive bonuses. So that's the goal. This should result in most people being able to do most of the things that they do on live. But as we add new content and make new harder stuff, it will show, right? Like that there's a difference between the classes. You get to heal yourself and other people and do damage. if you swap things around in combat. Nobody else really gets to do that. Heat weapons. Okay, so heat weapons are used even when the target isn't weak to heat right now, right? This is not good, right? Heat weapons are overrepresented in the meta of the game. People just use them everywhere, even if the target isn't necessarily weak to heat, because why not? Like, it lets you just shoot infinitely and do lots of damage. You can have really greedy DPS builds that don't have as much powering potential because heat weapons have really low DPE. Because the DPE does not factor in fires, right? And this crowds out other damage type choices. We don't want you just picking one damage type and saying this is the best, I'm going to use it all the time. Damage types exist for a reason. Resist profiles exist for a reason. And it's okay to have a preference, and it's okay for that preference to be something that's good some of the time, but it shouldn't be the thing that's good damn near all the time. And that's kind of the reason why we're doing this. So the biggest reason for why this was happening was because of DPE. Yeah, there are some AI that people are fighting that have weaknesses to heat, great, but most of the time it's because of DPE. What was happening was fires were not being factored into the DPE calculation for heat weapons. So now they are. On live, this would be 0%. Like, none of the DPE was attributed to fires. Or that's not the way to say it. Fires were not assumed to be worth anything, right? They just didn't cost any electricity. Also, making the fires pay for 100% of their electricity, or paying for 100% of their damage and electricity costs, probably wouldn't be fair. It'd be inappropriate. So we found a middle ground, right? And so fire weapons now use a bunch of elec, but not that much more. Somewhere between 0 and 100%. I don't remember the exact number. I think it's like somewhere close to 50. Yeah, somewhere around 50%. But it just depends on the the amount of DPS that the weapon gets from fires. And so as you look at different weapons, you'll see that the DPE scaling of the weapon relative to what it was before the patch on live will be a little different. And so your mileage may vary depending on the weapon. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Beam weapon sizes. Okay, so I'm just going to be like straight up here with this. For a long time, we had a lot of beam weapons in the game that were massive. And we couldn't add new beams. So I'm sure some of you may know what the Gargantuan Gaigo laser, yeah, that's what it's called, is. And it's like thousands of size, and people used it in battle spheres a long time ago, and they'd hit things from like 10k away, and okay, maybe not 10k, like 6k away or whatever. Yeah, that's the glory days of the battlesphere, being shot while you were hiding behind somebody else because they were using a long-range radiation weapon. Yes, those days are not coming back. You know, rest in peace, battlesphere. We never want to see you again. But we don't like the fact that beam weapons have sizes that are not consistent with other weapon types. So what you would see on live right now, someone would use like a Vazaha Caress or something, and it would be like 50 something size, and it would have like really high DPS, like 500 DPS or something like that. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that amount. And it would have really high damage as well. And so that's not good. Like, we want big DPS weapons to be bigger and to have lower DPE. And the Vazaha, like Caress, does have lower DPE, but it doesn't have big size. It's like tiny. It's like the size of a weapon that had lower DPS and higher DPE. So it's like a sidearm size, but it's got like main weapon or primary weapon DPS. Yeah, that's not right. And then on the flip side, right, like we've got really big weapons like that have a little bit more range, maybe a couple hundred more range, that are like 3, 4, 5 times the size of an actual big weapon. And this meant that like we couldn't really make big weapons or longer range weapons because they would just be too big for anybody to use. So long range beams were too big, couldn't make bigger ones. Short range beams were too small for their power. So that makes choosing a high DPS beam weapon something that you just kind of did because it made sense, right? I have the space, I'm just going to use it. But now with these changes, you have to be intentional. If you have a high DPS beam weapon, you're going to build around it because it's going to be big enough to warrant you having to like think about whether or not you want to use it. So we want beam's size to be aligned with high DPS, low DPE like it is for projectiles. And this also applies to transference weapons. After the patch, I'm more than willing to take a look at some of the weapons and figure out whether or not adjustments need to be made so that, yeah, maybe they do less DPS, but they have less size so that people can still use them if they want as a sidearm. And that's going to take, some feedback from players and some discussion. But I will be more than willing to look at those conversations and, listen to them and see what people have to say. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about on hit effects. So, on hit effects, the reason these weapons exist is that they are there to allow you to have some options for dealing with multi-target scenarios where there are lots of targets around and you want to be able to kind of kill them quickly, right? And that's what this does, right? This lets you kill targets without using a lot of extra energy. We found that area of effect weapons were just too good. And so this is AoE weapons. Like you hit them with like a beam or most of the time it's a projectile actually, because most weapons that are area of effect are projectile weapons. You hit them with a projectile, a little animation pops up, and then anything within range of that animation takes extra damage. The closer they are to the center of it, the more damage they take. These things had really big range. I don't know what I was smoking when I put those in, right? I don't know why I let the AoE range get to like 1,000 almost for some of these weapons, but I did. And it's nuts. And it makes it makes the weapons too consistent, right? Like you can just consistently hit 10, 15, 20 different things that are in range of each other. Like 1,000 range radius is massive, right? That's a 2,000 circumference, or diameter, sorry, 2,000 diameter circle. I'm messing up my math terms. And it's crazy, right? Like that's insane. So that had to get nerfed. And so the biggest AoE ranges are smaller. We don't want you just using one weapon type, one on-hit weapon type, in every situation. It just shouldn't be the best in every situation. So we also made splash, chain, bounce, and spray better. So like these are interesting. These are different. So let me explain what they are and kind of how I see them. I'm the one who's been working on the project of making these good, and I've kind of got a wide latitude to do what's necessary to put them in a spot where players care about them. So I should probably tell you what I think they're for, and then maybe if you're like, well, okay, if that's what it's for, right? It's currently not good for that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is what they're for. So AoE and Splash are both kind of for like lots of group targets close together. When you have lots and lots of targets that are really close together, Splash is supposed to be good, and so is AoE. So lasers have Splash, projectiles have AoE. Okay, close group targets. Chain is supposed to be really good when you have a couple of targets that are spread out, but they're kind of hard to keep grouped up, and you want to kind of be able to hit them. So you might have a target that's like 500 away from you, and then there's another one that's 1,000, another one that's 1,500, another one that's 2,000, right? Like AoE and Splash can't do anything to that, right? But Chain can. Chain can hit all of them, and since it's a beam, right? Chains are generally on beams. There's some special weapons that they're not on. I think it's the Zeus Lightning Torpedo. Yeah, I think it's the Zeus Lightning Torpedo that has chain as well. But most chain weapons are beams. And so you get instant hits, right? It just goes bzz, 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 and it just zaps. It's like chain lightning, if you've ever played a game that gives you that effect. And it's supposed to be for spread out targets to just constantly apply damage to all of them. Just constantly hit them. Bounce. Now, bounce is basically, if any of you have ever played StarCraft, it's like the mutalist projectile that kind of like can bounce between two things. So bounce is really cool because it's really good when there are two things next to each other because it just bounces back and forth between them for as many bounces as it says. But it's also really good at hitting things that are in clumps. So if there's a clump of things, the bounce can bounce between all of the different things, and do damage to all of them. So bounce is like a more forgiving version of chain, right? If there's only two things, then bounce just bounces between them until it runs out of bounces. But if there's lots of things, it'll bounce between all of them. So this is good for things that are a little bit more spread out as well. Because it's a projectile, if they're moving, it's a little bit harder for it to hit those things, especially if it doesn't have good tracking on the weapon. But generally, it's going to hit if it's not moving too fast. Now, spray. Spray is tough because spray basically is supposed to be AoE, but respecting collision code. So spray basically makes copies of the bullet come out of it. So spray is supposed to be right, like, hey, like I get to hit less things than AoE, but I do more damage from the spray effect because that spray effect can hit multiple things, or it can hit like maybe not the same thing, but these different projectiles can hit like a thing, and it's supposed to be pretty good because of that. So that's kind of supposed to be really good when there's not a lot of targets around, but the targets are like kind of close together. Okay, so most of these changes are to like damage per second, DPE, the range on the jumps and bounces, and it's intended to create reasons to use them and less reasons to use AoE all the time. This might not be enough of a shift. We'll have to wait and see. My hope is that it is, and that I don't have to do anything else because I'd like to not have to, but I might be wrong, and we might need to do something else, so we'll see. Okay, let's move on. We got a couple more to go. This should be pretty quick, I think. These are less difficult things to explain. So we made some changes to advanced class subskills. Let me just run down the list real quick. So bot PhD. We don't like how combat bots users, right? Users of combat bots, fleet commander, etc. were required to get bot PhD in order to do anything with their bots, because their bots would not inherit skill bonuses unless they had bot PhD. So we've made it so that bot PhD makes the bots inherit 10% of those skills instead of 30%. And now all combat bots automatically inherit 50% of your skills. So if you take bot PhD, you get 60% total skill inheritance, and you also get the extra slots, right? So just good all around, but you don't need to take it if all you care about is skill inheritance. So this should give people more reason to pick other things potentially than just bot PhD all the time. Droney, I already mentioned it doesn't give you an extra +1 deployed drone. I already mentioned why we didn't like that, right? Like it's basically forcing you to pick this skill in order to get a thing that used to be automatic. Also, this like just locks up a sub skill if you want to use drones. And for engineers, this was just like a must take. And for everyone else, it was like, why would I ever consider taking this? So hopefully people consider taking it. Resilient. So the old Resilient basically said, hey, if you take damage, I'm going to block like 90% of it for 1 second, and then I won't do anything for 30 seconds. Yeah, it's like kind of bad. It was like one-shot protection, but not really because anything could trigger, even a Zebu cart shooting you with an ion P shooter, right? But this one, we're giving it this effect. So if you and your possessions take any non-direct damage source of damage, so like AoE, splash, environmental damage, maybe you get shot with collision code, right? The thing meant to shoot something else, but you take the shot instead. You take 20% less damage, and so do your possessions. We know that there's a lot of frustration about bots and other things kind of getting hit by non-targeted damage or splash and then just dying and the user not really having anything to do. We don't, how should I put this? We don't want bots to be immortal to splash damage. We don't want bots to just easily live in in-game combat scenarios. You should have to worry about where your bots are. You should have to worry about how much damage your bots are taking. Your bots should die if you have pure DPS builds and aren't keeping track of them on them. But we can be a little bit nice. We can be generous. We're generous. We will let your bots take 20% less damage, and you, right? Maybe something interesting happens from this. If this is enough, great. If it's not enough, we'll look at maybe increasing the percentage. There has to be a percentage of for this bonus where it's noticeable, where like it is noticeable, and your like bots live. They live through something that they otherwise would not have lived through. I know when I've had like my rift jumpers in Anatolia, there have been situations where they took just enough damage to kill them from the wave on the boss, but if I had, just a little bit of damage mitigation, they would have lived. So those situations have to exist elsewhere too, right? Like there's got to be situations where your bots or your drones or you were taking damage from some like indirect source, and just a little bit of mitigation would have been enough to keep them alive. So this is what that's for. Um, Centered. We made a change. Just want to make a note. This is not going to make it on release. It's not going to make it on release because there was some weird bug which like basically caused your ship to constantly recalculate stuff, and it had this weird outcome where like your hostility stat would like stack to infinite, and if you had shield monkey, and you used like enveloping monkey, if you just pressed a button on your keyboard, you would like drain your shields to nothing. And we couldn't release it like that, right? So we pulled centered back. It's been reverted to what it is on live, where like you get flat shields and energy out of combat or something like that. But what it was going to be, and what we're still planning on making it with some potential changes, is if you haven't taken any damage for a couple of seconds, you gain energy regeneration based on how much shield regeneration you had. And so it was like 20% basically. So if you had like 10,000 shield regeneration, mind you, this is like in combat shield regeneration. You don't get the out of combat shield regeneration. So the shield regeneration from your shield charger doesn't count for this, but tweaks and everything else did. So if you had 10,000 shield regeneration, you'd get 2,000 energy regeneration if you hadn't taken any damage. So you can see like it would create a really interesting situation where, like, you could have a high shield regen build and you know dip out of combat, or just not even dip out of combat, just avoid damage for a little while, and you get a bunch of energy regen. It also came with a 100% hostility bonus, so if you were shooting and you hadn't been taking any damage, you would just generate more hostility. So it was a really interesting skill. Hopefully we can get it fixed for the next patch. And the reason why I asked for it is because, just you know me, I'm trying to give all these reasons for people to use shield regeneration, right? Almost every class I mentioned, except for engineer, had something in there about shield regeneration, and this is my goal. My goal is people should have reasons for using shield regeneration. Um, right? You should care about it for some reason. Not for some reason, but you should care about it because it can matter. And people obviously know that shield regeneration on Shield Monkey is really impactful and important, right? You can make a 9 vulnerable Shield Monkey if you have enough shield regen. And so while we don't want everybody being 9 vulnerable like Shield Monkey, some amount of regen is good because it does increase everyone's effective health against like consistent damage. Okay, strategic deployment. Um, Instead of gaining like 50 speed out of combat flat, you and your bots, your possessions, are going to have 50% more speed out of combat, just flat out. Whenever you take the skill and you get an OC, you're going to get 50% more speed. It's just better. I mean, I don't know really how to explain this other than it's just better. The one on live sucks. No one would take it, and if you did take it, I don't know why. And it's better now. It's good. If you want more speed out of combat, use strategic deployment. Yeah, probably good on scout ships. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about our last thing. Our last thing here is regenerative shields. So I talked about this a lot throughout the entire presentation. This wasn't mentioned in the blog post, but I think it's a really important part of the changes that are easy to kind of miss if you don't, like, if you first log in, you're like, why does my shield have more shield bank? And so let me explain it. So there are 3 types of regenerative shields before. There was a first level that traded 13% shields for like 8% more regen. There was a second one that traded 34% shields for 14% more regen. and a third one that traded 56% for 71% more regen. The long and short is that this is crazy for the first and second. Like, why am I giving up so much shields for so little regen? Um, Shields matter more than regen when you have low shields because then you just die. If someone does or something does enough damage to you to kill you, like to just straight up kill you, your regen means nothing. So the longer you're alive, the more your regen matters. And so the goal of this is really just to make it so that regenerative shields have enough shields such that the user gets to actually use the regen. It just wasn't a fair trade. So we reduced the amount of shields that you lose for going into a regen shield, right? This is compared to the baseline, compared to like a shield that has balanced stats, right? A Solarian Rampart is a good example of this, for like a balanced shield. An example of a shield that was in the first section was like a M51 Benefactor. One in the second section was like a oh man, I can't even think of it. Like a gargantuan misdirection or something like that. And the one in the third would be there's a luminous something. There's like a luminous shield that has like 4K regen or something like that. Um, and so now these like we reduce the amount of shields that they lose from 13% for the first one to 8%. Uh, 34% for the second to 13%, and 56% to 41% for the third. Right, so it should be much more tempting to use regenerative shields, right? So that's one of our goals, right? We want to tempt people towards shield regeneration bonuses and shields with shield regen, right? Like that's what I really want to do. I've tested some of this out on my end. You can get a lot of shield regen with the, you stack all the bonuses and you use a good regen shield on a lot of different classes. It's actually like it actually can work. Now I'm not a PvP theory crafter. Some people would say I'm not really good at PvP at all or the game. I'm sure there are those who think that. So maybe I'm wrong and this isn't going to do that, but I hope it does. Um, and so in combination with the regeneration bonuses on these classes and the like other changes that we made to the banks, we're hoping this is going to narrow the gap between Shield Monkey and other classes with regard to their shield sustain, and make it so that flexing into a more regenerative setup is desirable. This is not going to change preferences for bank setups overnight. This is not going to change the meta overnight. This is not going to result in people running around with like fully regenerative shields immediately, right? That's not what's going to happen. But some people may choose to. And one of the cool things about this is it lets us make challenging content in the future that pressures healing, right? Like I can make content that says, hey, your shield monkey just doesn't do much healing at all. Or like you can't be healed very much, right? As a result of this. Or your drones don't get to heal for a little while. Or they heal for very little. And I can reasonably expect that players will have the opportunity to flex into shield regeneration bonuses. Um, Going into that zone, they'll know, okay, well, this does this thing in this fight, and I can't just rely on healing the entire time. Um, and I think that's a good thing because it means that we have more like influence over like the types of puzzles and the types of fights that players have to engage in. And I think it'll make it so that designers can do some really cool stuff. This is not, again, this is not going to completely change that. They could already do this, but this makes it so that if they do this, players have some recourse, right? Like they have something they can do. It's like, okay, well, I don't have that much healing, but I can do this thing now where I'm more responsible for my own livelihood or my own life with regenerative shield, right? And that's really what's important. We want to make sure players have options for their own survival, and regen shields to help you do that. Okay. And so the end. So these are the reasons why we did what we did. These are the things that we did. And my hope is that this video kind of gives you the opportunity to peel back the onion a little bit and see why the devs did what we did. I hope our reasons make sense. I hope, if you have any questions about what the heck this means, that you'll ask them. And I hope this was worth your time, right? This was a, a nice chunk of time. that I decided to devote to this, and my goal is that you all kind of found this to be somewhat interesting. Um, and yeah, that's it. And hopefully hear from you in the Discord, or on the comments in the video. And I look forward to seeing you in Neuroforge 1.0 when it hits live. See you later.